Hey everybody, this is Grace. In this video I want to talk about basically what some would call patriarchal abuse. I'd say these days you can call it narcissistic abuse. Some might. And it's basically, let me tell the story. Let me start this with a story. A true story. I have known Adam for, let's say 40 years, but last month was 39. And of course, being female, things have been different for me than for him, and vice versa. And about back in the 90s, I think it was, he and I remember where we were driving down the highway, and something he said, which I don't remember that, I said, well, that's the way it is for you, but that's not the way it is for me. And that was like, say, 25 years ago or so. And he said, what? Are you telling me my reality isn't real? Maybe he laughed. We both laughed, but maybe he thought I was gaslighting him. But no, the truth is, it's not always the same for females as it is for males. And we know that. Nobody's that naive, I don't think. Well, I shouldn't say that. Some people may be. And anyway, I mean, he and I still have these kinds of things. You know, he had said something from a male perspective that's how it is, can be for everyone. When back then, no, it wasn't, and still to this day, no, it isn't. And this one is about females. I'm well aware that males are taught things too. You know, growing up from, I'm talking mainly about people around my age or older. But back then, they were taught certain things like big boys don't cry, and they were also on the flip side, kind of on the flip side, taught that boys will be boys, so that they basically could get away with anything. I mean, these things aren't just for my generation. Some people still do these. So, but this one is about females. And so I told that story because, like I said, still to this day, you would think 25 years something would change on it. But lately we've gone backwards. Yeah, unfortunately, here in the United States at least. And and some didn't respect what other women throughout centuries have gone through to get us to this point. They think that being a feminist is, oh, shame on you, is a dirty word. And shame on you for actually understanding that females don't have the same. And to try to move it to where we do. There's equality. Now, there are differences. There's always be differences between males and females. But not to this extent. Okay? Just not to this extent. There's a middle ground here. It doesn't have to be one extreme or the other. And there are things females do that are better than males, and things males do that are better than females. And both should be seen as equal. Okay? Now I'm going to tell another story. Okay. Now, when I was a teenager, even before then, when I was in first grade, kindergarten, even, the teachers, that I had along the way realized that I was very bright. I'm not saying that to brag, it's just fact, and it's also part of this story. And by the time that I was in high school, I was interested in a lot of things, but my friends were different. Like, my two main friends, one was more on trying to fit in a way that role that many of us were taught, too many of us, maybe all of us, females, that we're female and therefore we're not supposed to be smart. We're not supposed to let boys know that we're smarter than they, and math, this kind of mentality, and that you shouldn't focus so much on that. Instead, you should focus on things that are going to be what you will be doing the rest of your life, basically barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen. That mentality. When I was really young, what I heard, really young, what I heard, it was in a time of, you know, um, when there was a lot of unemployment. And it wasn't just about women, but it was females. It was that these women need to learn that they need to stay at home and let men get the jobs. And when you're really young and you hear these kinds of things, but for whatever it was, for me, when I was very young, my main question, and still is to this day, is why? Why? Somebody tells me something like, well, these people, when anybody says something like these people, generally what's going to follow that, not always, but generally what's going to follow that is something that's very prejudiced. They're stereotyping them, something along this line. Those people or these people. Anyway, but anyway, yeah, that's stuff that would be said as these people, those people, and but we were taught that, you know, women were to be females. Female, you know, female is what many people, is what is called for a female who hasn't become a woman. Okay, she's not 18. She, whatever age it is, wherever you live, that's an adult. She's not considered. And even even the word woman, people will still try to stay away from it because it seems like there's something wrong about it to some people. And there's nothing wrong about being female. There's nothing wrong about being a woman. Anyway, I got off my train of thought here. But anyway, so some of them were taught this about that you have to be, you know, females, that you have to fit this role, and that's your role in life, you know, gender role, and it's not, but that's what they were taught. Basically learning those kinds of skills, like taking home ec classes, and I don't know, what was the one that boys took? Something like, I don't know, you know, like the girls would take home ec and the boys would take shop or something like that. But it was separated. You know, the girls did this, the boys did this. And, but that's what we were taught. You know, how to sew. I remember making a little rabbit when I was in 6th grade. We were taught how to sew and taught, you know. And this is a regular public ISD, you know, kind of thing. Anyway, by the time I was in high school, you know, well before then, I was put in honors classes. And I was often one of the few females in math, especially. Okay, let's talk about stereotypes here. But there was the friend that I had who, she really, you know, she bought into it too much. You know, the way that gender roles, she bought into them too much. I mean, she bought into them. Let me just put it that way. But she was very intelligent too. You know, I should say, and she was very intelligent too. So it was constantly like a balance for her. My other best friend, she was, nope. She just wasn't all that interested in any of it. Okay? She wasn't going to go to listen to what she's told, or her gender roles, and she wasn't all that bright. That was the one. I think she was all that bright in a way, but not in, you know, as far as studying. Yeah. Anyway, so just us three, there were such differences right there. But when we got into high school, 9th grade was high school for us. From junior high, we didn't have middle school. There was no middle schools back then. When we got into 9th grade, you know, they really separated you out at that point by your intelligence, just to put it that way. And there was basically 3. There was honors, average, and what was the term? I cannot remember. Those who needed help, and not because they were. Well, there was 4. There was also the 4th one would be special ed, but they were in between. Okay. And anyway, so we were separated out. So me and my three friends, we were of the first three. I was in honors, and that friend, she was kind of like in honors and not. She was both between both of them. The third too, and the one that was in the third, she. Okay. But the interesting thing is, she was taught things that those of us in the honors weren't, or middle weren't taught, and we needed to have been taught. Yeah, like when you have, what were they called? Word sentences to do math, and we weren't taught so much that we just jumped over all of that in our maths. We were, honors. We just were supposed to have figured that stuff out ourselves without being taught. Really, seriously, and we did. But anyway, once we got to ninth grade, me and my two friends, these two main friends, we had other friends, but we decided to join every club we could, because we wanted to go on the field trips. Me, I kind of wanted to go for the purpose of them, so we did. And one of them was debate team. We joined the debate club, and we went to all these. We took trips and we'd stay in hotels. We were of course chaperoned and all this stuff, and anything we could do that we could go and have fun. But I was very interested in the debate, and even though I had extreme anxiety back then, extreme panic attacks, unbelievable. But I really enjoyed. We went to seminars. We had to attend these seminars if we were going to be in there. But one of the things, and I've mentioned this before in videos, one of the things that we were taught was, I remember sitting there. I remember these two guys were playing chess, and the coach, he was the person on the teacher. I think he was also a history teacher. He was in control of, he was the main chaperone, the main one to get these all together. He was standing there, and I was watching them, and something came up, and he said, or one of them said something about, but you can't debate. I said, why? My favorite question, why can't I debate? And the coach says, because you're a girl. I said, why is that? And he just said, that's just how it is. I said, why is that? And he didn't know what to say. And like I've said in videos before, he definitely didn't need to be the one to chaperone that, to organize debate club, if he couldn't debate with me. And yeah, but I did learn a lot of things in the debate, taking the classes, going to the seminars, such as things like, whenever you have an opponent, you don't attack them, you don't attack the way they look, or any of that. It's the issue that you're addressing, not attacking the other person. But some politics have really screwed that all up for a lot of people, because then in debate, if you do attack the person that you're debating with, verbally attack them, you lose. Automatically, you lose. So anyway, but that's something that I was taught. In ninth grade, I was 14 something. I graduated, I was 17, so yeah. But yeah, anyway, we were taught things like that, and my other friends, they weren't all that interested in it. It was just, we wanted to go to things like, maybe one of them was the library club, and we just liked going. They just liked going to the trips, but I was all into all these things. But really, the thing here it was, I was into debate, and I was told I couldn't debate because I'm a girl. Think about how that just screws up a young mind. And sometimes I do think that where I'm eventually going to go with this, maybe not this video, but another one, that when they're really young, like when, as females who were taught these kinds of things so young, the different kinds of, that's abuse, different kinds of reactions. And we all know that there are people who are narcissistic, and families like the dysfunctional families, and it was all of them. Each child, maybe there's more than, maybe there are a few children, each one reacted different to the abuse that was in the family. Some went that same way, some didn't. Do you see what I'm saying? There was no really set. This one will do that, and this one will do that. No, and that's how I see it with this kind of situation. Those of us who were taught, you cannot, because you're female. Remember, there are things boys, males were taught too, but this is about females. So, okay. Now, one of the things, here's another one. One of the things is when I was in, by this time I was in high school. I'm not sure what grade, don't remember, but I was a math whiz. Anything that was mathematical, my brain just went, figured it out real quickly. Probably not so much these days, but one day I had to take, not one day, it was 2 days, back in 2011, I was taking, the easiest way to put it is that there were 2 days of IQ tests, but only one, of course, was the actual IQ test that, I got a score from, and, but it was 2 days of different types of tests. Now, they did have the intelligence to say, okay, at this age, they said at this age, the people around this age should understand this and remember this, because by the time you're in your, say, 40s, some of the things that you were taught when you were younger, or maybe even in college years, you don't remember so much. I had to basically retrain myself to certain mathematical formula, okay, then to get to it, because it had been so long since I had used them. And I had to sit there and figure out. Some of it was simple stuff, too, how to divide fractions. Really. Now, some of these things, is something that I hadn't used, or to multiply by percentages, or, there were no calculators, which I grew up in an era where we really didn't use calculators. I think it was like when I was in the 11th or 12th grade, whenever they came out, but we weren't allowed to use them in classes. Maybe before then, but we just weren't allowed to use them. We had to use our brains and a piece of paper and pencil. Figure it out, show your work, that kind of thing. But I was really smart in math. I mean, I already told you what we were basically taught back then, that don't let boys know that you're smarter than they in math. Okay. Well, I just didn't know that, and I think that the type of, teenager I was, I wouldn't have cared. But I was always the first. I was in the honors, and we didn't really go around calling it honors back then. And I would have been in an advanced placement, but my mother wouldn't allow it. She wouldn't allow me to skip a grade. So basically, by the time but I took classes that were, and basically my last year I only went half a day, and then the rest of it I don't remember what they called that. I worked, and same thing. But anyway, so I was the best at math in my classes, and I had a teacher, I think it was 9th grade actually, and he would do the thing of giving extra credit, like 5 points or something like that. And the class was mainly males and boys, teenage boys. And, they would get so angry at me because I wouldn't miss any. And if nobody missed any, there was no extra credit. Nobody could make 100. If anybody made 100, the rest of the class didn't get that 5 points extra credit, see? And, I was a product of my environment to an extent, and they would get so angry at me, so I would start missing, I did a test and missed a question. Well, my teacher, I remember his name even, he was an older gentleman. Well, I remember he had white hair, and he called me aside. He said, "You missed that question on purpose. You're smarter than that, and you don't do it again." And I was like, "Yes, sir." You did miss it on purpose. Yeah, I did, because of the way they are. Don't do it again. So I didn't. I wouldn't do it again. But they would still get so angry at me because the class would know it was me who didn't miss anything. But in that class, there was things that, like, there was one classmate, and he was all into like radios. He would bring this stuff to it, like he was going to figure out how these things work, and he was going to make it work, and all this stuff. Radios, yeah. And I was like, why have I not learned stuff like that? Why is it that? Because that looks awful interesting. You know, why wouldn't I even have that in my mind? Especially my mother. She would do that. These were old-fashioned radios, okay, and she would solder. Isn't that the word for it? Like something would come loose, and she'd solder it herself. She'd figure out what was needed to do, and yeah. So to me, it was interesting too, but I just wasn't taught to go down that road. Okay. So whenever I got to college, I was late going to college. I got married first. Kind of did things a little bit backwards. But I was a career student, undergraduate and graduate. And I started off as a math and computer science major. I was taught how to program. The first one was in basic. I'm telling my age. Basic, yeah. And then I wanted something more challenging, so I chose psychology. It was a totally different language. I said, this is all Greek to me. It was, and I already have problems remembering names of stuff. I remember the concepts like you wouldn't believe, but the names of stuff, whether it's a name, an actual person's name, or term, whatever, I'm not going to remember. That's the toughest thing for me. Even people I meet, trying to remember their names, very tough. I remember their personalities. I can't remember their names. You know, matching was horrible for me. You know, as an undergraduate on test, matching was horrible. But anyway, but I wanted something more challenging, so I chose psychology, and I chose sociology as my minor. Well, I didn't. I chose both. I chose anthropology as my minor, but I also took classes in sociology. I think you had to. I moved around a lot, went to different colleges and universities, never had a problem with getting in, not just in Texas. And but the one where I graduated, one where I earned all my degrees, they did not have anthropology. So I had been taking classes in sociology, so I added that as my second major. So I had a double major as undergraduate, and I worked on, I think it was 3 or 4 masters and a PhD. Oh my goodness, I was full of it. That's when I got burnt out too. But I added sociology as my second major, and so sociology was like, this is really what my brain needed, because it was covered so much, and that's what my brain needed, was that big challenge. Now, I remember this. I think it was my first or second class in sociology, and I took it at UTA, University of Texas, Arlington, and the professor was talking about this kind of thing, and well, more than just about males and females, but he was saying that far too often females' voices aren't heard over, males. And we're in a class, and at some point I raised my hand to answer, and I answered, but he apparently didn't hear me. So I don't know. Actually, it was in classes like that. You didn't raise your hand. You just spoke. The attitude was, you're not in high school. You don't raise your hand. You just speak. You say your opinion. You're not going to be rude to somebody, but if there's a pause, you say your opinion. You can tell your opinion. But anyway, and there was a guy next to me, and he kept stealing what I would say, because my voice isn't that loud. Over the years, I learned to speak louder. Yeah. And he would steal my idea and tell the professor, say it out loud, and take the credit for it, sitting right next to me. Oh my God. But the professor had just said that, and I'm like, oh my goodness. Some people are not going to learn, and they're not going to stop. Yeah, and a lot of my videos, and I never did connect that to this before. But yeah, there are a lot of times when people still my ideas or somebody else's. I mean, just sitting in a class, you could see that person just stole that person's idea, and it wasn't just in classes. You could see that at jobs, you could see that anywhere. There are people on this planet will say, if I tell one story about it, that's how it all is. They're the all or nothing types. No, it's not. Period. Okay? Anyway, back then, and probably still much to this day, and some, males and females, boys and girls, starting from really young, were basically taught, they were geared toward a direction as far as where they would go and what kind of fields they would go to once they became adults. I think it was, I would know, it was really thicker back then, but now, you have to wonder if some things we've gone backwards again, way too much. But, in those fields that they would go into, did what? Males fields, what they call them, male-dominated fields, more money, they get paid more. Female-dominated fields, they get paid less. Even nursing, okay? Dominated. That doesn't mean that they're only. That's just dominated by that. The majority in those fields would be male or female, whichever one it was. And now, previously, before, when, say, white women in the United States weren't allowed to work. Basically, they weren't allowed to work once they got married. And, they're right there. They had to have a male in their lives. Because they, if they were married, they couldn't work. If they were single, they weren't going to make much. Okay? And those jobs that, like clerks, that were previously held by men, as time went on, they paid less and less. How many of us have done that? Gotten a job, something like a clerk job, or and it paid crap. Probably still does. I don't know, but I haven't worked in that kind of field in a while. But I'm going to say this: with all my degrees, my level of education and all that, I was basically taught here, if I didn't go into a field that, even going into a field that was needed, that was, some of them required, some of them didn't, my degrees, I was taught that I'm not going to make crap. I'm going to make close to minimum wage. Seriously. And then other ones, when it wasn't even required, I was told that worked against me. Told things like, well, I know my boss, she wouldn't hire somebody with a degree because, no, she doesn't want anybody smarter than she. Really? They want people whose minds they can manipulate easily. I'm not saying that anybody who doesn't have a degree can be easily manipulated at all. But the sentiment, the way the whole conversation with this woman went, was just that. They didn't want someone who could use logic to that extent. This female only, and I know them well. I know one of them, not the other. They wanted people who they could tell, do this, do that, even if it's illegal. I worked at another place. When I would come up and said, no, it was in medical billing, and I said, you cannot do that. More than one, actually. I had moved and came back, and went to a different place, and I quit that one, both of them, for that matter, because they wanted to hire people who they could say, well, you can just do this and that. Well, people doing this and that could get them to where they could never work in that field again, and even imprisoned. Okay, but they wanted people who they could tell that to, and if they'll just say, well, that was just her. Our corporation doesn't do that. It was her mistake, not ours. You see? Yeah, that was the type. Okay, that's why I said that. They didn't want anybody, and you can, and I will tell you, I will agree. You can be a person who never set foot into a college or university, and you're smart. You can connect the dots. So see, all of this I'm leading somewhere, and the bad thing is I don't like making two videos of one topic, but I'm going to need to. Okay. And I'm going to have to figure out how not to have to put up all this all this history to lead to that. But the next one would be, if I were, nothing else happens, it changes. But it's about why some of these people become histrionic. These women, I was talking about females in this one. They become histrionic. My guess, I'm not talking about personality disorder, but their behaviors of. And that's where I was going with this. So, anyway, maybe with a blend with narcissism, narcissistic behaviors. Anyway, I think that's enough for this one. It looks like I've used up quite a bit of time on my memory on my this camera, cell phone. So anyway, I'll talk about that in another video. But in this one, if you have a story to tell, you feel like telling, leave it below, comment below, and I'll talk to you on another video. Bye.